Major Mike Santiago, Fort Pierce PD. I am the major of support services within the agency. I just want to clarify or clear up some points from Saturday's incident. On Saturday, we had an incident where there were multiple victims of a shooting, one of which included an officer-involved shooting. So to provide some context, just shortly after 11 a.m. on Saturday, the police department responded to multiple 911 calls for two specific calls. One was a call that referred to a male, an adult male with a gunshot wound, and that was located at the 1400 block of 23rd Street, North 23rd Street. The second call, which came in almost simultaneously, was a call of a theft of a vehicle, which occurred at the 2100 block of Avenue N. So officers are responding to both of these calls. They arrive to these scenes. They see a male, in fact, suffering from a gunshot wound. While there, they hear additional shots being fired just northwest of their location. Officers now advance towards the shots to determine what was going on. They continue on. They hear another volley of shots further west. They continue advancing, where they ultimately encountered an armed subject at the 1600 block of North 25th Street. There was a gunfire exchange, which subsequently between the officers and the armed subject, it subsequently ended up with the result of the subject dying as a result of that particular incident. Throughout the investigation, once everything was secured, additional information started to come out. We had information that there were additional victims of gunshot victims within that 4-block radius. One was at the 1600 block of Northwest 24th Street, and the other one was at the 2400 block of Avenue P. What we're looking at right now is trying to determine if all these incidents are connected. Right now, what we can definitively say is that that car theft was connected to the officer-involved shooting. We know that that was the same subject of the car theft, but right now we're trying to determine if the other incidents are in fact involved. Just to step back a little bit, right after the exchange of fire at the 1600 block of 25th Street between the officers and the subject, I want to let you know that the officers did in fact begin CPR, started first aid, rendered first aid to that individual prior to them, that person being transported to the hospital. It is important to highlight the dangers that these officers go through on a daily basis. They're responding to particular calls. While they're there, they're hearing additional gunshots, and they're actually advancing to the gunfire to try to determine what is actually going on. That unfortunately led the officers to use force to neutralize that particular threat. Just to make everybody aware that the Florida, as a result of protocol and practice, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement is handling the case where the officers used force. They do investigate that. The Fort Pierce Police Department is taking lead on the other cases in conjunction with the State Attorney's Office. Victim information will not be released at this time, pending next of kin notification and other issues related to the case itself. The suspect was identified as 28-year-old Bernard Smith. We don't have a last known address, but we do know that he frequents the area in the city of Fort Pierce. That's essentially what I have at this point. Hopefully that clears up a little bit from what was relayed on Saturday. Understand that this is a very dynamic case. It's complex and multifaceted. So because of that, we're trying to ensure that everything is done in accordance with the law, and we're protecting the integrity of the case itself.
So there was 2 deceased individuals, well, 3 in total, but was there another individual that was wounded by gunfire?
There was a total of 3 individuals that were injured as a result of gunfire. I'm sorry. 2 of which, there were 3 victims that died as a result of gunfire. 1 of which is still alive. I'm sorry. So a total of 4 victims.
Okay, so the 2 deceased individuals that were found at the
After. So we have the first person that we responded to was the first gunshot wound. That person is still alive. That person is in serious condition at Longwood Medical Center. That was the very first call. The second one was the subject himself.
That was the car theft,
That was
or related to the car theft?
related to the car theft, but resulted in the officer-involved shooting. Then we have two additional victims that were found while the investigation was being conducted, while we were in place. We're trying to determine if all of those are connected to this particular subject.
Do you know yet if at least that first victim, the one that's now at HCA Florida Longwood, do you believe that that person was shot by the person who was involved in that officer's shooting?
It's unknown at this time because the person at the hospital is unable to speak to us. So in the moment that we have an opportunity to question the victim in that case, then we'll find out additional information.
So just to be totally clear, none of the other three victims, aside from the actual suspect himself, are confirmed to have been shot by that same suspect who engaged in gunfire with police.
It's too early to determine that right now. As the investigation unfolds, we'll be able to provide that information if in fact they're linked, but right now it's too early in the investigation.
And with the car theft, you said it was the 2100 block of Avenue N. Is that where the car was stolen from or where the car ended up?
Avenue N. That was where the car was initially stolen from.
And that you believe that the suspect who engaged in gunfire with officers had stolen it from that area and then drove it to the area where he then later engaged in...
Yes, the car was essentially found, ultimately found, the stolen car was ultimately found at the 16, I believe the 1600 block of 24th Street was where the stolen car was located.
There's ring cam video that was provided that you see a person. Was that the suspect that had the officer involved shooting with?
I haven't seen that ring camera, so I'm not sure. I'm sure if any, and that's another message to get everybody, if anybody witnessed this, if anybody has video surveillance footage, ring camera footage, please contact the Treasure Coast Crime Stoppers or the Fort Pierce Police Department to provide additional information to us so that we can link these instances if they need to be linked. Now, understand this is like a puzzle. We're getting piece by piece by piece, and as more information comes to light, we're able to actually put the case together. But right now, for the protection and the integrity of the case itself, I'm not at liberty to divulge certain details.
Now, Bernard Smith, you said you can't find an address for him here, but does he have any history with police prior to the officer-involved shooting?
Yes, he does have a history, violent history. I believe the last thing he had was carrying a firearm. So there is a violent history in this particular subject's past. We don't know if that was part of what's going on today, Saturday, but we're looking into that. Detectives are looking into every aspect. We're exploring every avenue to ensure that this case is done in accordance with the law.
Did he say anything to officers at the time, you know, when he exchanged gunfire? Did he say anything to them, anything that would have indicated why he had a gun and was in that neighborhood?
I don't have that information right now.
Is it, how many officers are involved? Is it one officer?
We have no, multiple officers were involved in the shooting. We're still trying to review everything that is related to that, understanding that, yes, we do have body cameras, we do have video surveillance in the area. That takes hours and hours and hours of review for us to be able to determine exactly what transpired at that time. So we are sifting through that. The detectives are tirelessly working on this case. They have not stopped since Saturday, and I don't anticipate them stopping. So we will continue investigating this case properly until that time comes where we have more information for you.
All these events happened in a window of how many minutes from the initial call until?
Well, we're looking at the initial call just after 11 a.m. So we're looking at about maybe the 30 minutes, 30 to 35 minute time frame that this entire thing actually occurred.
How many officers are actually on administrative leave?
There are 3 officers on administrative leave.
So does that, if 3 officers are on administrative leave, does that mean that there are at least 3 officers who discharge their firearms?
No, it does not. It just essentially means that there was a traumatic experience, force was used, and the chief of police deems it necessary to ensure that the officers are given the time that they need to be able to process a lot of this stuff. folks, I can't stress enough how stressful this is to these officers as they're out there on the streets. If they're involved in the shooting, if they're shot at, or if they're encountering any type of stress like that, it takes a toll. It takes a very, very heavy toll. The last thing that the officers want to do is have to fire their weapons. They were forced to in this situation, and it is important for us to identify with that.
So is it fair to say that more than one officer fired their firearms?
Multiple officers fired their firearms, yes.
Okay.
Did the suspect fire at the officers?
That is still being reviewed.
How did you tie Burnout?
I can tell you that there was an exchange of gunfire.
How did you tie Burnout to the carjacking?
Video.
That's
And it was not a carjacking, it was just a theft. A theft of a vehicle, yes. I wanted to clarify that point from Saturday. Originally, the call did come out as a carjacking, but the investigation deemed it to be an auto theft itself.
You mentioned that he has, kind of a prior criminal record, if he's had any history of mental health issues, such as being Baker Acted before, or, kind of being involved in the court system to that degree?
I do not have that information, no.
Do you know if he has any family local?
I do not have that information. Again, as the case unfolds, we will be able to provide additional information. I just wanted to provide you with the roadmap because I know Saturday was fast moving, and we try to be as transparent and provide as much information as possible without compromising the integrity of the case. But we've come to a point now where we have provided everything that we can to this point. There will be additional information passed out or provided at a later date as the case unfolds. But right now, I believe it's entirely too premature to be able to detail certain instances that occurred.
So if we would like to, pardon me for the description, dumb it down. We're talking about 3 incidents that could be either 2 and 1 separate, 3 independent, or they're all connected.
All of the above. We're exploring every single avenue in order to identify what actually transpired on Saturday. Like I said, it was dynamic, it was fast moving, and it was complex. We have no motive behind the case. At this particular juncture, we have no motive. We have somebody that was involved in an officer-involved shooting. We do have that. But we also have others that were either injured or killed as a result of these actions or some action. We just don't know at this time until we're able to get information from the community, from witnesses, and from the investigation itself. So again, the community has been very helpful. We encourage that. We want them to continue to help us help this case so that we can get to a successful resolution on the case.
And it seems like
Yes, ma'am.
the 2 people who were shot and killed that you realized after the first 2 incidents, how were you alerted to them?
This was while we were already on scene. We had established a perimeter to secure these particular crime scenes. And that's when witnesses came forward and started identifying certain things that were going on, brought it to our attention, and then we went from there.
So the 2 individuals that I guess that she was talking about, the 2 that were, I guess,
Innocent, I assume.
or that were deceased that you guys discovered after the initial kind of things calmed down, I suppose. Were they found inside homes, outside in front yards of houses, or where were they?
They were inside homes.
Different homes.
Yes.
And clearly
Okay.
some victims, the victim's family have come outside. What are you telling them in sort of this part of this investigation? Because they seem very distraught.
Well, when you say victims, you're going to have to narrow it down a little bit.
The 2 that you found after the fact. I don't know who they are related to yet, because
Right.
you haven't said who they are.
So what we're doing, some of the things that we do, obviously, we involve our victims advocates extensively in ensuring that the family is provided with the resources that we have to assist them through these trying times. So we have the victims advocate working, we have the investigators that are diligently working to try to solve this case, to make some sense of it. Because right now, there is no sense to this. We have no motive, we don't understand it. So we're trying to make sense of it in hopes that that will provide the family with some understanding of what actually transpired. Everybody is up at arms, and rightfully so. But I can assure you that we are diligently working this case. We have our partners that will assist us whenever we require assistance. So we are working this. We're just asking, and as a message to the community, we're asking to help. Any help, any videos that they may have, any eyewitness testimony, or even hearing, if you heard something, contact the Fort Pierce Police Department or the Treasure Coast Crime Stoppers to provide us with additional information so our detectives can successfully investigate this case.
What type of weapon was seized from the?
I'm not at liberty to discuss the type of weapon at this point because it's evidence. So there was a weapon, in fact, found at the scene where the armed suspect was, but we're not going to be discussing that at this time. But that information will be provided at a later date.
The area of where the stolen car was taken, could you give me that area?
The stolen car was at the 2100 block of Avenue N, as in Nancy.
That's where it's recovered from? Or
No, that was where it was stolen from. You want the recovery address was the 1600 block of North 24th Street. That was the recovery address.
And that was right around that same area where the actual suspect was, who then engaged in gunfire with officers.
Correct. So if you can follow me for a second, just for the last point of clarity, we get 2 calls for service almost at the same time. One is a gunshot wound, one is an auto theft. Officers respond to both. While the officers are on the scene, they hear gunshots relatively close, just west of them. They go and advance towards those gunshots to try to determine what's going on. They don't see anybody at that time. They hear another volley of gunshots. They advance again. They ultimately encounter an armed subject at the 1600 block of 25th Street, where there was an exchange of gunfire, which resulted in the death of the armed subject. And that's where we are right now to try to keep it as clear as possible. That's where we are. The rest of the details, there's a lot of details that we will provide at a later date, but right now, for the protection and the integrity of the case itself, because it's multifaceted, there's so many moving parts to it, we don't want to step ahead of ourselves by trying to give you something that may change as the case evolves. So this is where we are right now.
One last
Okay?
question for you.
Yes.
The exchange of gunfire between the officers and Bernard, was that behind the apartment, next to the house?
It was at 2
Because
locations.
You keep saying 25th Street, so I'm thinking,
Well,
you know,
it was
Martin Luther King's
the
house.
1600 block of 25th Street, which is going to be on the east side of the road, not on the
Right.
west side of the
Well,
road.
that's what I mean.
There's
So was the-
there's a particular apartment building there, and in that immediate area is where it occurred.
Behind there, between that and.
Behind and leading up to where it ended up. The subject was actually located, and first aid was rendered behind that apartment complex by the fence line. That's where first aid was rendered. But the encounter happened a little bit west of it, the initial encounter with the armed subject.
Any chance that exchange of gunfire, one of those stray bullets might have hit an innocent victim bystander in one of the houses around?
We don't believe so, but we are, again, explore everything. We do have round accountability where we ensure that whatever we fire or whatever the subject fires, we ensure that we go house to house to check to make sure that that wasn't part of the case itself. So thus far, again, we're moving forward with the case. We don't believe that to be so, but we don't stop exploring that avenue.